conference call, now in its 10th week in terms of a discussion with the founder and leader of our movement, Lyndon LaRouche, as we have appropriately called this our Fireside Chats, and we'll be underway here in a few minutes as people are beginning to get on the call here this evening. So the last couple of weeks has been absolutely dramatic, and I'm sure we'll hear a discussion about that this evening, but I think it's very, very important that under these conditions that in the course of this call that people kind of check their own thinking and how they might be reacting to incredible levels of propaganda coming through the media about things like presidential elections, etc., and to take a step back and think in terms of how Lyndon LaRouche is approaching this situation, which we're going to start off this evening with a special presentation of a discussion that was held earlier this evening between Lyndon LaRouche and Tony Papert, editor of Executive Intelligence Review. And in that respect, I'd like to, in terms of background reading for people who are not yet subscribing, I would encourage people, and I'm not saying this just because Tony's sitting behind me right now, I would encourage people to subscribe to EIR. The latest issue has a picture on the front, which I will admit is you do not want to look at too close to mealtime. It's a picture of Queen Elizabeth and the famous Sun, Rupert Murdoch, tabloid in London, their Royal Highnesses. And this, I'm sure, is going to be part of the theme here this evening as well, because Mr. LaRouche has indicated that in the next couple of weeks, the House of Windsor, the British Crown, is facing oblivion. So this is something which I'm sure people are reading about and watching as this entire question, which obviously, as everyone on this call knows, is a total vindication of Lyndon LaRouche, is right now exploding nationally. And there's new articles that are coming out. In fact, I think one of the ones now, or there's articles coming out concerning the bloodlines of the royal family, which came from, I believe, the earlier discovery of Richard III's body, which was found, I believe, under a parking lot somewhere in Great Britain, which, of course, led me to think about the fact that even if they're not related by blood, there is a connection between Richard III and Queen Elizabeth. He was found under a parking lot, and if the Queen had her way, she would turn the planet Earth into a parking lot. So basically, tonight, this evening, folks, we're going to be hearing from Lyndon LaRouche here shortly, starting out with a special statement from Tony Papert like we did last week. I would encourage people to continue the offensive around Glass-Steagall. For those of you who are on the call now, you should know that Congress is in session only one more week. That is not even actually a week from today, unless something unusual happens, which of course very well could. Congress will be out of session as of next Thursday. July 30th is their last scheduled day for between then and the following 6 weeks, the period we traditionally refer to as the guns of August. So this is it's a critical time for people to use these next few days to shake things up, particularly around the mobilization on Glass-Steagall. I'll also point out for you, those of you who are on right now, that there are 2 leaflets under the leaflet page. You can look under the section of LaRouche PAC. There's a tab that says Get Active, and there we have the leaflets listed. There are 2 leaflets from the last week: The Coming Interruption of the British Monarchy and Showdown Moment for the British Monarchy and Obama, which you can print out and distribute. And I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. This is John Asher here in Leesburg, Virginia, welcoming also those of you who are listening via the World Wide Web on YouTube, who have come also to this through Facebook and Twitter. You will get an opportunity to get your questions in during this discussion. There's a comment section on YouTube. Put your questions there. We have someone monitoring that, and I will be sent those questions, and we'll fold them in with the other discussion going on this evening. And there's also a place for those who are on Facebook and Twitter to submit questions as well. So if you're there and listening that way, don't hesitate to participate, and we'll try to get as broad a participation as we possibly can. And that brings us to the moment of 9:05, where I have to hit all the right buttons to make sure this thing starts in the right way. So here we now go. So I'd like to welcome everyone back. This is John Asher here in Leesburg, Virginia.
This conference is being recorded.
And we are here for our 10th Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche here on the 23rd of July, 2015, welcoming everyone back to this discussion. This is our 10th consecutive week with Lyndon LaRouche. Lynn, are you there? Have we got the connection? I'd like to welcome everyone back. This is John Asher. Well, we're waiting to get that connection here. I think I have all my buttons hitting the right way. So, Lynn, are you there? Can you hear me now? All right. Well, I'm still waiting to get the connection here. We're about to begin our 10th discussion with Lyndon LaRouche. We're trying to see if we have a connection here. I can see the connection is being reestablished. So as we're getting this connection back on, I think that they had a slight technical problem I can see on the other end here. I'm going to point out something for everyone on the call here as people are still getting on the call. We are have up on the website 2 leaflets which are part of the theme of, I'm sure, what is going to be discussed here shortly.
This service is provided by freeconferencing.com. Please enter your access code followed by the pound. This menu will repeat.
Okay, we
Please
are
enter your access code followed by the pound.
Experiencing someone is having a cognitive dissonance here. So we're straightening out our technical difficulties.
Please enter your access code followed by the pound. This menu will repeat.
Okay, well, I think what I'm going to do here at this point is, as we're getting our other speaker on, I'm going to get Tony Pappard on here to begin by reading a special message which has been formulated by between a discussion between him and Mr. LaRouche earlier today. And in the meantime, I'm going to fix our technical problem. So, all right, Tony, are you up there now?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead? We're going to begin this evening, folks, with a special message has been prepared, which is already up on the website, which will be, I believe, an editorial in the upcoming issue of Executive Intelligence Review. So, Tony, why don't you go ahead?
It's titled, LaRouche Wakes Up the Sleepwalkers. In his July 18th dialogue with the Manhattan Project, and subsequently, Lyndon LaRouche has spoken with a new level of frankness on both the depth and the immediacy of the danger facing the world today, and also on the shocking refusal of even most people who consider themselves the most dedicated and the best informed to really understand what time it is. We're on the verge of the collapse of the transatlantic system, which can come in various ways. Most of these ways are very, very bad ways. They involve the extermination of most Americans, for one thing. But they're not aware of it, and they want to deny that such a thing could exist. But that's exactly what does exist. They talk among each other, and they come up with consoling ideas which should not be adopted. We have to take a harder fight on this, because we're in dangerous waters in the short term. These summer months This very month itself is a deadly month. People who are trying to get a long-term view of what the future is are worse than wasting time. We need certain actions immediately. Too many don't understand the issue because they have too many facts that clutter up their attention. The situation is presently deadly. We're approaching a terminal state of international affairs very rapidly right now. I know what has to be done, LaRouche said, but he has great difficulty in getting it understood. We sunk Hillary. One of our members sunk Hillary by inducing her, in fact, to make a fool of herself. This has gotten things disrupted. But our situation is not such that you could get a deductive insight into the course of history right now. This thing is ready to blow fully. I'm thinking in terms of days and weeks at most before the whole thing comes to a decision. I think right now the threat is potentially, hopefully, that the British Queen would be thrown out by the British themselves. We're waiting for the effect within a week or so. Is the British monarchy going to collapse globally? Of course, we can't say, what do we bet on? We have to act to influence the event such that it will be determined partly by our influence. But the idea that you can deduce effects in practical ways, forget it. That's gone. What my associates and I do to fight in our organization is indispensable. But the question is getting a clear view of what this is about. Not diminishing things on the horizon. You've got to see the horizon. It may be a big storm coming on. Well, this is not an ordinary storm. It turns out to be something much more forceful. What we're doing is often what I'm able to do. That's the problem. On this, the great majority is hopeless. They have no realization of what the reality of things is right now. They just don't have it. They have specific issues, and they miss the big ones, the ones that are most important. You think you're getting a thunder shower, you find out you're getting a tornado. And the good thing is that the British monarchy is on the verge of collapse. That's the good news. They may escape it, but I doubt it. And it's probable that in 2 weeks or so, we'll get the end of the British monarchy. But people don't see it. It's coming like a thunderstorm or like a tornado on the horizon of immediate experience. And the British monarchy is doing everything to prevent that collapse. But now the collapse has control of them. It could be 2 weeks. We don't know, but we know those are the kinds of things we're facing in the next week or so. We've come to the point, people who've been fooling around, yes, but, my experience, our experience, this is going to happen, that's not going to happen. It's nonsense. Because they all believe in statistical methods. And statistical methods are the mark of the idiot. Because the future of mankind lies in the future, not in experience of the past. And the idea of being practical, using statistics, things like that, is what makes people impotent, makes fools of them. I gave a lesson over last weekend in New York, July 18th, which should be a lesson for them to study. That kind of exposition should be the method. When you try to interpret a couple of facts as your method of policy shaping, you're really incompetent. You're pitiful. You have to look at the future. Don't rely on statistics. Never believe in statistics ever, especially now. People don't realize that what they've been educated to believe in is actually poisonous and foolish. When I hear the words, let's be practical, I say, mankind is committing suicide. Put a cheerful point on it. Say what we've believed in was all crap. Now let's get serious. People speak of the merits of experience. I try to warn them about experience. People believe, first of all, in statistics. These are forces of demoralization and degeneration which have come in since 1890. The beliefs which have been established under the aegis of that conception have deluded people to where they have no intelligence of the future. They think of statistics, and people who believe in statistical evidence are just fools. They'll be caught up by the first storm which catches them. They don't see the future. At best, they see what they have experienced in the immediate past, or what they think might be the immediate future. It's just gibberish. Just think of everything printed in newspapers. It's absolutely incompetent. It's a fraud. They say we need more information. What they need is to get rid of some of the information which is fraudulent information. It's much easier to pick up fraudulent information supplied to you than it is to discover the truth, which always lies in the future. And you know that the U.S. population today has almost no conception of the future, of an actual future of mankind. None. Their future is what they hope or expect for themselves in the immediate period, their ambitions and their fears. But they don't have a scientific outlook because they're all practical people. And practical people are stupid people because they're all going from deduction from experience. And that's the greatest threat to the human race, of foolishness, which is sort of a global disease. We tend to have delusions. We believe in things. We try to console ourselves. I, says LaRouche, I have a different life. I worry about different things. I see the things which preoccupy most others, but they're not the major things. Something immediate, something unsettling is seen, but the sight of the process is lost. We just have to improve our diagnoses of things. Be less tempted to draw conclusions from recent or side experiences. We're on the edge of the self-extermination of the human species. In the larger sense, that's the problem. But people are so much concerned about other matters which to them are a priority that they overlook the most important things concerning the existence of the human species. And there are some people who get onto these ideas, but then the overwhelming popular opinion goes against them. If you eliminated all the Wall Street people from the equation, you could probably get a good insight into the matter. I have to fight another day because I know most of us so far are still swallowed by follies. We've made too many mistakes, in effect, too many false values, and a lot of bad misinformation. We're on the edge, and if we continue the way we're going to go over the edge. Because the belief in the statistical outlook on life is the most poisonous and destructive thing imaginable. When someone says be practical, you should shoot them as the most merciful act for them. People tend to learn from experience, but they don't see what they've not yet experienced. They believe too much in experience to date. Our society, take the U.S., is not organized in the way which is necessary for the well-being of our people. They have delusions. You can pick up what the delusions are from almost any street corner. They're running around with delusions. The economy is disintegrating at a rapid rate. The condition of life of our citizens is plummeting. The prospects of our survival are plummeting. And yet society does not respond to attacking these threats. They want to solidify their existing opinions, their existing prospects as they see them. They're ignorant of the truth of the situation. They're totally disarmed. A thunderstorm could come along and sweep them all off the map of the earth. Their eyes or their opinions are gazing in the wrong direction. They're not paying attention to reality. They're paying attention to their wishful fantasies or their meaningless fears. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I'm going to hopefully now. All right. So, Lynn, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Well, Lynn, while we were correcting out there our technical connection, as I think you probably just heard, we just had Tony Papert read the statement that he had drafted in discussion with you earlier this evening.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, Lynn, do you want to hear at the beginning of our discussion here this evening, do you have anything you'd like to add to that before we get on to the questions?
This is a matter of following up on immediately what Tony reported. The point is, we're living in a society where most people have beliefs, and the beliefs are based on certain conditioning, but they always really are thinking either in the fantasy of the future or saying, try to rely upon the past as the substitute for the future, for understanding the future. And the problem is how do you get people to get free of that? And what I'm doing with that, of course, I'm getting rather ruthless in one sense on what we do on Saturday in Manhattan, which is one of the things I work on. And since that time, since last weekend, when I made my report on that subject then, I've taken a tougher position on this thing because I realize that most of our citizens who think they have knowledge don't, because they're always idea of being practical or the idea of being deductive. And all humanity, and the very characteristic of humanity, good humanity, is to see a future which mankind had never experienced before. That's the characteristic of mankind. In animals, it's different. The animal life generally bases its very existence on the certainty of what their species, in the course of life, had presented them with. They never see the future. The future may hit them, but they don't see it as the future. They don't see it as a new quality, a change of life to a better form of life. Animals cannot do that. They cannot see that. Only human beings have the power to see the future. No animal can see the future. Only human beings. And unfortunately, only the few human beings who understand what the meaning of the future is. And therefore, today, I find most of us, what I have to do is I have to correct the mistakes of popular opinion, correct the error in which people put confidence in popular opinion. And if they thought carefully, if they look at one thing, let's look from the beginning of this cycle. Now, the cycle begins at the last decade, before the 20th century, about 10 days, or 10 weeks rather, before the last time. And since that time, mankind has drifted more and more into assuming that what was happening then at a moment will be what's going to happen the day after, or the day 2 days after, or something like that. We don't have science anymore. We have mathematics. Mathematics is a substitute, officially, since the 20th century, as a replacement for science. In other words, mathematics and the methods of mathematics are treated as a mere substitute for what is actually science. And that means the very idea of understanding the future. But remember, mankind is the only species which is truly intrinsically creative by its nature. No form of mere animal life is capable of understanding the future. And most people today act like animals do when they call that being practical. So that's what we've got to overcome.
Okay, and so with that, I'm going to turn on our button to get people in line.
Q&A session started.
And there we go. So we welcome people to get in line. You can hit *6 on your phone if you're on the telephone. You can also, if you are on the internet, you can submit a question via YouTube. We have someone monitoring that for us. Also, Facebook and Twitter, and we will try to intersperse these questions as we go along. In terms of those of you who are going to ask questions, I ask you to please do not use a speakerphone speak distinctly, and please at least give us your first name and where you're calling from, because I think it's very important, the kind of national participation that we have in this call. People get a sense of people calling in from all across the country. So, please speak up also, so Mr. LaRouche and all the people on the phone can hear what you are saying. So we're going to take the first person up here.
Hello, can you hear me?
No, I cannot hear you.
I'm sorry, the microphone on my phone is bad sometimes.
Okay, but you're very too light. I think you'd called in before. You're going to have to try to get another phone and call in. And we're going to take another person up here. Here we go. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Ron Adams from Mansfield, Massachusetts. How is everyone today?
Fine, thank you, Ron.
I'm a former resident of New Hampshire. Like Lyndon, I grew up in Franklin, New Hampshire, went to school in Concord, and then went to Northeastern University back in the 70s to get my bachelor's and master's degree. I've got a question. I'm a little confused as to who's pulling the strings. Is it the British royal family, or is it the Rothschild Bank holding company, which produces the fiat money, propping them up and supporting the Western financial system? Because
I think you have to read it.
That's sort of issue number one. Issue number two is the minions of the Rothschild banking system and the British royal family, their minions, including all of these conservative think tanks, Heritage Foundation, Travis Stock Institute, and the Council of Foreign Relations, these folks are borrowing money at 25 basis points from the Federal Reserve and now acquiring American corporations with fiat money, which is not based on anything, which is merely counterfeited. Where I grew up in New Hampshire, quantitative easing was another word for counterfeiting. And these corporations are now being bought up. Their real estate, their machinery and equipment, their assembled workforces, their patents, their intellectual property are now being bought up by minion corporations like KKR, Blackstone Associates, Berkshire Hathaway, GE, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Citicorp, in a last-ditch effort to, when the dollar collapses and everybody realizes the fiat money is worthless, that they will now own all the stock of these corporations. This is a grand theft on a grand scale. I'm going to hang up and listen to Mr. LaRouche's answer. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, I think the thing is can be simplified. First of all, what there has been is a history of swindle in terms of the United States itself. We had a great president, Washington. He was advised and was made by genius by a great scientist who designed the policy, the economic policy of the United States. Then the great scientist who had backed up George Washington as president was assassinated, of course. And what happened after that, we had a second president of the United States who was not a bad person, but was not a particularly competent person for the kind of problems that the creation of the new United States demanded. After that, we had a third president who was a rotten, pro-slave, slavery-promoting organization, and we had a series of presidents after that who were all pretty much in the same general line. We had a president who was very great. He served one term and was bounced out of that office and bounced into the Congress, the party of the Congress. He actually contributed greatly to the what happened after that, our success, Abraham Lincoln, he promoted that. And we had a period of good things, short period of good things. Then we had the usual bouncing back and forth between good presidents and bad ones in terms of general characteristic. Then we had to close out the 20th century, into the 20th century, by assassinating one of the best presidents, and we brought in a guy for 2 terms in office who was damned evil. And most of our presidents tended to be rather evil, at least in that process. So what has happened is the pragmatic attitude, which is borrowed from the British Empire, has been dominant during most of the periods of the 20th century. We've had only a few presidents, Franklin Roosevelt particularly, only a few presidents who were either well-meaning or actually great. And the great ones usually got assassinated or something like that. And that's our condition now. What we are, in that sense, we are actually have been under the control of the British Empire. But, however, something interesting is happening. We're on the edge of the point that the British Empire is about to be shut down. Now, I can't give you the exact date when that is going to occur. I can say that the first steps for shutting down the British monarchy is already in process. Now, if we can get that done soon enough, we can probably avoid a global thermonuclear war. The danger of thermonuclear war comes especially from President Obama. If President Obama is not removed fairly soon, or the conditions around him are fixed to see a solution, we're all about going to get into a thermonuclear war. And a thermonuclear war, which is the only kind of general war that the United States could ever expect, would be almost the extermination of the human species in a very short number of hours. Because once the United States government, under Obama, were to launch what Obama intends to do, and he's made it very clear that's what he intends to do, is to actually start a thermonuclear war against Russia. Now, Russia has a tremendous capability in terms of military operations. So for the United States, Obama, to get into that kind of a fix is by itself a cause for the virtual extermination of the human species in a very short time. So we're on that point. Now, I'm working on these kinds of things, and with circles which are also working on these kinds of things. But we have not, for most of the existence of our nation, for most of our republic's existence, we've had relatively few presidents who were not tragedies or outright crooks. And that's become like the case. Bush family, crooks. Obama, crook. And this can cause, eight presidencies, virtually, that alone. And look at the conditions of life of our people. Look at the degeneration of the conditions of life of our people. Look at the misery they're going to. Now you've got a pope who's a British agent. He's actually a creation of the British agent. And they're trying to destroy the human race by reducing the number of people. We have a governor in California. Now, the father of that brother, the father was not a bad guy. They're both Catholics. They're from California. But the father was not a bad guy at all. As a matter of fact, he did a lot of good things. But the present governor of California is an absolute evil disaster. Now, why is it an evil disaster? Because he was raised to be an evil disaster. And there are some ways that you can explain how that happened. But that's what happened. So this is the problem. We're on the point that unless we can muster ourselves not to be practical, not to eliminate mistakes, but to actually begin something new, not something that was old, something new that corresponds to the future of mankind. And that's what I'm dedicated to.
Okay. All right. I'm going to take another person up here. Okay.
Hi. This is Lynn Yan from New York. I'm the executive director of the Foundation for Revival of Classical Culture. Lynn, hi. How are you doing? I have a question, which is that we're about to start on this upcoming Monday our 2015 Music and Science program. We have something like 20 young people between the ages of 12 to 17, and and they're going to have the music. They're going to have their music in the morning. They're going to do chorus with a emphasis on polyphony. And I would like for them to have a course in the course of the 5 weeks of studies in a grounding of, what the scientific basis, for example, of the proper tuning is, to have, but more than that, also to have a sense of actually their own history, their own sense of humanity, because today, as we all know, the atmosphere of violence in America, and apathy and lack of humanity in America is kind of like in Johannes Kepler's time, and our young people represent the hope through the hope of the future of mankind, and they represent and I want these young people to actually see the hope in their own lives through the knowledge that they can acquire through things like I would like for them, for example, to really have a grounding in Kepler's work, in Kepler's music of the sphere, and various other topics such as American history, which they never learn properly in school. And I was wondering if you can comment on that and help me with that.
Okay, fine. All right, I think what the first thing we need is you need people who are experts in the sense of their own development in the principles of classical musical composition. This means essentially people who are going to go through the experience which follows the trail from the founding of Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, because Bach introduced a principle of composition and elaborated it somewhat in the course of his lifetime as well. And then he had followers such as Mozart, and Mozart was absolutely genius, and Beethoven, an absolute genius. And you had followers of these geniuses who set forth a principle of musical composition. And that principle, while it may seem complicated to some people, is actually the foundation of all competent success in the moral development, which is a necessary development of the human individual. A moral development in which the student, as being educated in music and practicing music, first of all, is the idea of locating the voice. In other words, if the person tries to sing the voice on the idea of trying to sing as such, they'll often fail, and they'll get into bad habits which lead into confusion. But what has happened in the course of history, from Bach into the beginning of the 19th and 20th century, the last great band was, essentially at one point, was Brahms. So that's sort of then you had a few people who spilled over into the 20th century. And typical, of course, was Furtwängler. And Furtwängler's role is typified by one example which any teacher of singing should have as a basis for approaching students, or any kind of students of all ages, right? And the placement of the voice is what the question is. Because the mistake that's made, which is destructive, is when you assume that the tone that you're singing, that is the indicated tone, when you base yourself on that, you get into a trap. Because the classical musical composition is always based between the notes. That's the formal expression, between the notes, not on the notes. The notes are there, but it's the motion between the notes which defines the kind of composition which is intended by all the great composers and the great performing artists. And therefore what you want to have is you want to have the moral benefit, and it's a real psychological benefit. You know, from being throwing your voice out in order to play instead of being stuck in the voice, it's a question of the movement of the voice from one note going between the next note. And the way this thing works has been the basis of all great musical composition since the original design of modern music by Bach. And all this thing up through the achievement, in particular, of Furtwängler. Because Furtwängler, they had a problem here they had to deal with. The problem was, how does the Ninth Symphony of Schubert function? Now, the score of Schubert's Ninth Symphony was known to anyone who was a professional musician during that period. But how is it supposed to work? And what happened is that Furtwängler reminded people that the principle of composition did not lie on the note. It lay between the notes. In other words, the motion of the notes, between the notes, as a series, is the principle of actual classical musical composition. Now, this is not just classical musical as some kind of a system. It is the very principle in which the student, when brought into that realm, when they begin to see themselves and see what their voice means, they realize that the important place is not the sound of the voice. It is between the notes. That is, you have a tone, and you have a tone on the other side. And in that process of that succession of tones, in that order, provides what's called between the notes. And the ability to get even simple children, simply trained children, into getting the idea of singing between the notes is the most important moral and psychological step we can do. And should begin very soon in the early stages of trying to help the student of music, help them see what the meaning is of between the notes. And when you get them to that point, you put them on the road for really an insight into the real meaning of classical artistic composition. And that's what we want to do. We want to make little geniuses out of little people.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful. Lynn, I have a question here from someone listening via YouTube, which is somewhat, and I say in a similar direction, not precisely on music, but I'm going to read this. It's from Nick from Las Vegas, and here is his question. It says, "Sir, I believe the only chance we have as a nation to lead the world towards a better world is to gather a sizable group of enlightened people whom will be listened to by the weight of their godly character. Is this a workable plan to affect the movement of the masses to something that will turn us towards positivity? Thanks, Nick." That's his question.
Okay. Well, the problem is, what do you mean by that? I mean, you mentioned, a godly approach. But what is a godly approach? Now, I have a very good, clear idea of what I mean by that. And I would say this thing about music, we just talk about children's training in music. I think that's a pretty much an entry point to knowing what a godly Princeton position would be. In other words, if you can get people to locate themselves in a sense of the beauty which is found between the notes in classical musical singing training, that the person is not banging it along on a guitar or something like that. They're not making they're not noisemakers. But many people today, we have very few people who are actually musicians anymore. We have people who are called musicians, but they really aren't musicians. They're clowns. They really are clowns. And they're bad clowns with bad taste. So what we want to do is you want to take a principle such as music, classical music, an actual according to discipline. And when you actually achieve the ability to lead young children, at those ages, to get into the place where they recognize suddenly, they come to a point of conversion, shall we say, where they actually understand the importance of singing between the notes. In other words, the idea in all great music, it is not the note which makes the music. It is the voice which is placed between the notes in a very specific kind of way. And that is what brings the student of music into the point that they locate, very importantly, the placement of their voice between the notes. Because that is when they're singing a note on a note, and they go out from that to another step. They come to a point where they are between the notes. And it's when they come to that between the note thing that they reassess what they think is the note, and they want to place it so that the sound of the note itself becomes something in between, which then inspires the expression of the next note assigned. And when you get the student to sing a beautiful voice, even for a little child, a beautiful voice, which lies between the notes, that's when you've succeeded.
Okay. All right, great. So we're going to take another question up here.
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah from South Florida. I guess my question, Lynn, is in regards to Greece. Can you explain a little bit more what's going on there?
In what?
Greece. She asked about Greece.
Oh, Greece.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What you're dealing with is you're not dealing with Greece as such. You're dealing with a terrible bit of destruction of the nations of Europe in particular. It's a destruction. I mean, the hoodlums like Scheubler is an absolute inhuman person, a beast to man. Well, that's one thing, but you have most of the leading figures in Europe are of a similar disposition or leading in that direction. Beautiful things, the beautiful ideas, the beautiful poetry, the beautiful literature. I mean, when I was, spent a good time of my life in Italy at the time that the tradition of that Italian school was there. This was beautiful. The placement of voices, wonderful. You even got something out of the French sometimes. But their unfortunate choice of language and enunciation sometimes spoil their ability to get a musical effect. But in this case, Germany had a very good musical basis in there. The Greeks had their own version of a beautiful idea. That this became confused also at the same time. So the point is that the idea of the beauty of the human soul, which is the right term to use. It may seem a little delicate, but it's the right term. Because we're all going to die, right? All human beings die. But no animal lives forever. Whereas the human being can make contributions which are transported as new discoveries to second generations or third generations. So the purpose of mankind is to develop mankind's own creative powers, actually creative powers, where man rises and makes discoveries that mankind before had never known. And these things are great achievements. And that's what I think is what's required. What has happened now, in the case of Europe now, and I know Europe very well, from my standpoint, from France, from Germany, from Italy, and some other locations in other parts of the world. And these were places I walked in and had friends and so forth. And they all had a certain kind of beauty, of the best of these people. Each had their own kind of beauty, true beauty, of the human mind. That has been largely lost in my lifetime. That has been lost. And the problem here is to restore that. And to restore that by helping some people to capture what their ancestors had understood. But they, in the meantime, have lost.
Well, I have a question also sent in, Lynn, from YouTube, which is in a similar direction. So I think I'll just read this to you right now. It's from a gentleman named Thomas, who I believe is from Texas. And what he said is, Lynn, how should I understand the concept of creation, that is God, because I think it's a little hard to understand this creation concept. He said there are various interpretations of it. That's his question.
Well, I would say that the argument of Nicholas Akusa probably stands till today as a good point of reference for defining what must be the case. Now, the point is, if you really get the chance to expose yourself to Nicholas Akusa, who is actually really the founder of a whole doctrine of Christian belief, which is also a reflection which took into account the ancient Greek. Just for me to explain, when Nicholas Akusa, who was actually one of the great leaders of the Christian church in his lifetime, that he had taken a visit the archives of ancient Greece. And when he got there, he was somewhat disappointed on one account. He could get the writings of the great Greek thinkers, but they weren't practicing those great thinking processes right then. And so Nicholas Akusa made a turn in his perspective of what he could do, and he defined a new view of the approach of mankind to mankind's godly intention. And now this becomes problematic, because what happened at the beginning of the following century, after the century in which Nicholas had lived, you had the Catholic Church was a monster in the main, an absolute monster. Killing people, burning them alive, all these kinds of things, these horror shows. And that was somehow ameliorated later, temporarily. And we went into a new period, which was the period of Nicholas Akusa's follower, Kepler, for example, or Johannes Kepler, and also some great people in that period from the death of Kepler into the middle of the founding of the U.S. economy, U.S. society. And so there is an actual history which does correspond to mankind's view of what a deity is. Now, a deity is not an object, because a deity, a true deity, is one that has been creating the universe, not something that is out there inventing something, but has been creating the universe by leading mankind to a higher level of insight, a higher level of vision. Like, for example, now we have a couple of points which are really pedagogical. One, Nicholas Acusa, followed by what? By the founder of the discovery of the solar system. The first man to discover the solar system. Then you had a whole period of people who were great geniuses. And they are the ones who supplied the kickoff for the American Revolution. So that's the way to look at it. There is a fundamental way, not where you say God is going to come down and throw some writing in front of you or something like that. It doesn't happen. We're talking about God. It should mean the creator of the universe, or the creative power of the universe, in the universe. And that's what Christianity in particular should mean. God is not something which is controlled by the present. What we should mean by God is the existence of a powerful force which is humanoid in its intention, which lifts mankind out of all kinds of despair and failures to realize that mankind must become something always better than his present generation had been, and that should be followed by something higher in the next generation. And that's the meaning of the God principle. Is there's a principle in the universe which is part of the power of the universe, and that mankind is privileged against all other living species to participate in the intention of that great creator.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Lynn. So, all right, I'm going to call on the next person up. Here we go.
Hi, this is Kathleen from Massachusetts. Hi, Mr. LaRouche. Can you hear me?
I'm having some trouble with the distortion in the transmission.
Try it. Go ahead, Kathleen. I'll go ahead.
Okay. I try to go out and go depending upon the weather, but it's usually pretty nice. And start a conversation with people regarding what's going on in the world. And they'll say, "Oh no, that can't be." I saw O'Reilly, whatever his name is, on Fox News, and he didn't say anything about that. So you can't be right. Or I saw this in the newspaper. Putin is an animal. He's a dictator. He's no good. And I'll say, he's a good man, and he loves his country, and he wants to protect his people. I said, where did you get that information? Well, it was in the newspaper. I said, what are you doing reading the newspaper? Get rid of the TV and stop your subscription to the newspaper. Because all you're getting is lies.
Yeah. Well, I think, the whole problem is mankind has to, look, everybody's going to die. Every human being is going to die. I'm sort of a holdout. I'm at 98 years, 94 years of age. So I'm sort of a holdout. And there are a few people older than I am who are still functional. I'm fortunately functional. Most people who are alive, who have been alive, are either dead or incapacitated. So I'm one of those lucky people who still has a prowess to do a few things, and I am determined not to waste my time on that subject. But no, the point is we have to realize that, as I said before, just in the previous question that came up, what mankind has to do is has to first of all accept the fact of the immortality, the lack of immortality of mankind as a living being. Everyone human is going to die, sooner or later. The question is, what's the meaning of their life? Does the meaning of their life lie in something they did before they died? Or does the meaning of their life mean more precisely that they are going to develop themselves in order to achieve things for mankind which mankind has never really accomplished before, or will fix up and repair what was neglected earlier? So mankind has to be an immortal institution in which the progress of mankind from a lesser degree of knowledge is passed on to a higher degree of knowledge. That mankind is, for example, now, at first we knew something about Earth. Then we began to discover things beyond Earth as processes. Then we began to discover more things. We had scientific discoveries, actually physical scientific discoveries, new ones. And we had a great zest, a great insight into still higher aptitudes of physical scientific creativity, great artistic composition, like the great artistic composition which started with Bach. And that led to a set of developments in the course of those 2 centuries, which led mankind to a higher achievement, a higher moral achievement. And then when the 20th century came in, then the musical value and the moral characteristics of the transatlantic community degenerated. And it's been degenerating ever since, in general. So the problem is mankind has a mission. The mission is not that we're all going to die, but we are all going to die. The question is, what are we going to create out of our living processes? And what's our vision of that? And it means that we are being a creative force in ourselves. That whatever we are giving something to the future of mankind, which mankind would never have discovered before without our intervention. And that's what we should be basing ourselves on. We are going to die. All of us are going to die, mortally. But we need not die in the sense of having contributed something in the course of our life to bring mankind to a higher level of existence and knowledge. And that's the way it has to be. There is no alternative to that. That's the only reality that mankind has the power to express.
Okay, well, Lynn, I will say I'm getting a certain degree of bombarded with questions here related to the presidential elections, so I'm going to kind of combine 2 questions that I've gotten, both of them from folks that are listening to us via YouTube. And the questions, one is from Jim from Minnesota, the other is Tracy from Virginia, and one of them is basically asking about whether or not, basically citing his view that the two-party system is a criminal enterprise and isn't having a third party a legitimate idea. Tracy cites the fact that in the past that our movement had run many individuals for political office alongside of yourself, Lynn, when you were running for president, and asking, can't we once again run a lot of people for office? So I think these are expressing similar things, so I thought I'd throw them both at you at the same time, Lynn.
Okay. I don't think that the multiplicity of individuals is going to do that job. My experience tells me, no, that doesn't work that way. It can work that way. We had, at a certain point in my own experience, my own leadership in this organization before I was put in the Husgo by the Bush family, that there were changes that were made. And when I was put in the Husgo for a period of time, even though I got out of there and was doing all kinds of things in all parts of the world, even after then, going into other parts of the planet and so forth. But the point of this thing is, what's important is that we question the failure of mankind today. In other words, what's wrong with the United States? What's wrong with Western Europe, in particular? The transatlantic region, what's wrong with it? What's rotten about it? Well, I can tell you that my experience is that beginning actually from the last decade of the 19th century, that the United States itself and also Europe has been in a constant drift into degeneration. Now, the wars that broke out, and if you look at the history of since the late 19th century, you'll find there's a perpetual degeneration with some exceptions since the 1890s. The good one was a great president who was assassinated before he could live out his life. We had a president who had two presidencies, and he was an evil fellow. We had some other people who were evil fellows. Another generation, evil fellows. Then we had Franklin Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was a genius, a man of great courage, a man of great insight, a man of great accomplishment. Then we had replacements, which the FBI went into a degeneration phase. That was bad. We look at the destruction in that whole period. Destruction. And when I got into the point where I got into doing something where about 1970, 71, I busted out and created a new organization. And in that process, by the end of the century, that is, with the oncoming onset of the next president, that was promoted. I was actually a leading figure in the government during the U.S. government in that period. Then I was shut down by the Bush family crowd and put in the jug for a while just to get rid of me. Then I got bounced back and did some more things which were notable. Always fighting against these kinds of things and making some successes. But the essential achievement that I made was the continued fighting for what I knew had to be done. But what I was fighting for was what I was fighting against. Like the degeneration of the Bush family under the presidency, the deep degeneration of Obama, the Obama administration, and things like that. These have all been evil, pure evil. The Bush family has been a force of evil in the history of the United States. And Obama, the same thing. Obama is bringing mankind to the brink of a thermonuclear war. And that thermonuclear war, if launched under Obama now, during this summertime, would mean the probable extinction of most of the human species. So those are the real issues we face. So there are facts, there are considerations, there are understanding for people who understand it, who understand history. The remedies are understandable, at least by some people. And if those some people are permitted to show what they do know for practice, then we can do a pretty good job.
Okay, we can take another question up here. We go.
You can hear me? Good evening.
Good evening.
This is Rod from Brooklyn. And the earlier comment by Tony when he was doing the speech earlier on what's going to be in the EIR, the inaccuracy of the statistics. When I start talking to people and they ask for facts and they ask for this and that, and I tell them some of the facts, it's very difficult for them to comprehend just how the statistics have been gerrymandered, rigged, and interpreted. The governor of California, who you've correctly stated is evil, stated when he was asked how many people were eligible for certain benefits under the new health care system, that there was 800,000 who were homeless, etc. And then his staff got their act together and they found out that they had 2.5 million homeless. This is quite a difference. What sort of tools can we use to try to wake people up when we talk to them and when we deal with people and trying to get around this huge lie that they put in place?
Well, I would say one thing, which is really the essence of the matter. They, so-called, they, do not have a monopoly on the shaping of history. And I know that. I know that from experience. And, what I've known includes a lot of things where I was set back. But I'm a stubborn cuss, and I tend to not pay much attention to being ordered to drop my account on this thing. If we actually mobilize a significant minority of the people who are, intelligent people, some of them in the Congress, some of them in related positions, some of them in practices of all kinds, moral practices, scientific practices. The scientific practice, of course, is poorer today than it ever was beforehand. Science is almost non-existent, but there are some people who do understand something about science. But we also have to see, look at our situation outside the United States. Look at China. Now, you look at China now. Now, China, of course, has always been China, but it's been sometimes stronger in its accomplishment and sometimes weaker in its accomplishment. We have India. India is going through a kind of a new renaissance, a new stage of development, which many of us who are, like I was very close to Indira Gandhi, and to that whole group. And she was assassinated by the British system. They killed her because she was too successful. And we were close to her. So we have these setbacks of this type, setbacks. But then, what happens is you will find in the history of this matter there are certain kind of revolutions, sort of counter-revolutions against these setbacks. And this is happening now. We have what Egypt has made it a revolution. It doesn't mean it's a perfect revolution or it's perfectly successful, but it's a good revolution. And in South America, there are nations which have made good revolutions in terms of their development, and so forth and so on. So what we're trying to do is to take the evil that we're fighting against, mainly, chiefly, the British Empire, that is, the British royal family, which is not really a human family, but it's some kind of creature. Anyway, they're Nazis. I mean, the thing is out now. The British royal family are a pack of Nazis, and the people in Britain who know this stuff know they're a bunch of Nazis. The Irish know they're Nazis. The Scots know they're Nazis, and many of the English know they're Nazis. And we're on the point right now, at this moment, where the British monarchy, the British Empire, is about to be shut down. And the chances are that it's going to be shut down. It may not be next week, but it may be the week after that. And that may be in time to prevent what the President Obama, who is a stooge of the British Queen, and has been from the beginning, if they take them out of business and put some of our people in business with this new election campaign coming up now, I think the new election options, which are coming up now, include some people who are qualified to become president. Different kinds of people, different people. But if you pull that thing together, you can pull together a presidency, not just a president, but a presidency. That is a team of people built around a particular president, which is assigned itself, or does assign itself, to take over many different kinds of differentiated tasks, which the United States people need urgently now. And that's the best way to look at it.
Well, Lynn, let me just tell you, I just got an email, actually from my wife, Rochelle Asher, who just indicated that when it comes to the presidency, what we partly helped to shape with the question from Daniel Burke last Monday to Hillary Clinton is reverberating still today. Apparently, Hillary Clinton stuck her head further somewhere in the wrong location today. In South Carolina, she was again asked about Glass-Steagall and said once again that this would actually be a mistake. So I think that this was, the coverage of this indicates how O'Malley, who I think you were just referring to some degree to Martin O'Malley, has really, including today, really hit very, very hard on Glass-Steagall. So I think that this we've definitely succeeded in getting this question to the forefront of the presidential elections already this year. I think that's really very, very important.
Yeah, well, the important thing to think is think about how Hillary's finished. That she is, by all intents and purposes, finished. And what happened to her? Here she's actually been prompted and backed up by Obama. She worked for Obama for a while, which I told her was a mistake, and other people told her was a mistake. And then she was crushed by Obama because he's a real beast. I mean, he's the worst kind of animal you ever want to talk about. So she was broken, and she left off the office that she'd had then under Obama, and she walked out of that. Then she went to work under Obama to set up a presidential candidacy, contrary to everything that I would have wanted and many other people would have wanted. So she's really not a factor anymore. Because how'd that happen? Because one of our associates who was auditing her address in New York City waited until near the end of her address, and then said, "But what about Glass-Steagall?" Now, what happened was, as an immediate result of that, you had all these reporters and so forth who were swarming around this thing, and they suddenly went to work and exposed the whole thing. And she refused to say anything at that point. On Glass-Steagall, she has said nothing about Glass-Steagall except to denounce it, as she has done again. Now, on this basis, she's finished. There's no way she's going to climb back into the presidency by her campaign. She's disqualified permanently because she committed a fraud, and she got caught in public. And suddenly all these reporters who were coming to witness what she was doing, and that speech, picked up immediately on that, and she's wiped out now. She's still running around. She still has backing from certain sources, teams of people still trying to resurrect her. But the point is, her policies are totally against the most vital interests of the citizens of the United States. She's proposing to follow through on the Obama policy, or a branch of the Obama policy. She's still a slave of Obama, in fact. And she's not going to come back, because any of the people who are candidates for leadership in the United States government, honest people, including, we got four members of the business there now, of the Senate, and they are working in that direction. Other people are going to be moving more and more in that direction. So she is finished. She can do nothing good, because what she's doing is a fraud. It's a fraud against the people. But it's a transparent fraud. And by a good accident, she launched her announcement of her campaign by actually having, crushing the idea of Glass-Steagall, which she's done ever since then. So she's lost it. She sung the song which throws her out of the presidency.
Okay. All right. We can take another question up here. Here we go.
Hello, this is Sheila from Riverside. And we haven't heard much about Ukraine lately, and I'm wondering if there's still going to be a provocation, if they're still going to be used as a provocation, and what's going on there anyhow.
Well, I think the whole thing is tied in with a more complex process. First of all, the issue on the table right now is the effort to dump the Queen of England, and as a matter of fact, to dump the entire British family and what their attachments. That's on the agenda now. It is not absolutely secure that that's going to happen, but everything now shows that there's a very strong trend to macerate the British royal family. Besides, both of them are kind of, a little bit beyond, shall we say, the thinking stage, and they're just actors, and they're all Nazis, All of them, all of the British leaders are Nazis, and that whole story is pouring out now. Not only in Britain, it's pouring out all over the world. That the British royal family is a pack of Nazis. Oh, news? Well, where were you being for the last 50 years? So I think that's the factor you want to hear about. And the point is, what we have to do is understand what the task is to get the job done. But let me give you what the problem is. People say that we use statistics to define where the future is going. Well, that is the most stupid thing that anybody ever suggested. Yeah? The most stupid thing that ever happened was being practical. And being practical in terms of what popular opinion thinks is practical. Yeah? That really is idiocy. And that's what's killed most people. They try to be practical. Now, the point is they believe that statistics does it. It means they use mathematics. Well, mathematics is not science, contrary to popular doctrine. Mathematics has nothing to do with actual physical science. Science is based on the creation of new principles which mathematics had never been able to know. So you make discoveries. You make scientific discoveries. You discover what Kepler did. He discovered the solar system. Now we have a new development. We have the scientists today have discovered a higher order of life, control over human life. The galaxy, the galactic process. And so what we have to do is go to the kind of thinking which is not statistical. Get rid of the statisticians. They're idiots. And if you look at the thing, since 1890, there has been a consistent degeneration in practice of so-called science. In the main, down, 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 down to the present nadir. The doomsday. So what was required is we have to dump that junk and go back to the principles of physical science, typified by those of Alexander Hamilton for the United States, and typified by the greatest scientists who actually lived in our lifetime. And there are a few of them. So that's what we have to do. We have to change the whole agenda, and that's not so difficult, because all you have to do is say, what are the phonies in your block? You find a whole bunch of them already there talking away like parrots. But the parrots won't talk because they're ashamed of being in their presence. So the point is, we do have the ability, as human beings, we do have the ability of rethinking what our mission is and recognizing that some of the things we were taught to believe in were actually fake. And that's why we're having so many problems, including health problems.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll maybe take one more here since we got to a slight late start. So here we go. Okay. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Hi, I'm Carol from Los Angeles. I have a question. I don't know if this is, of interest, but it seems that the Empire seems to aim and do specific destruction. I mean, they've done so to many countries, but they really seem to make it a point to attack specific countries, like the foundation of a lot of Western civilization, thought, philosophy, etc., would be Greece. They've attacked Italy like crazy. There's a lot of tremendous cultural contributions that they have made even to this day, even for everything from fashion to design, anything that's creative. They've done. France is the same way. There seem to be specific things that they do, and specific countries that they attack. I mean, is this true, and why is it? It just seems to just stand out in my mind.
Okay. Hello? Hello? Lynn, did you get that? Hello? Well, I think we may have just lost the connection there, which is unfortunate. Well, we're going to see if hopefully we're going to get somebody to get the connection back on here, but I think we just seem to have... Lynn, are you there? Yeah, it seems like, folks, that our connection to Mr. LaRouche seems to have momentarily vanished. So I'm going to try to see if we can get him back on so that we can get some concluding remarks here this evening, if that is possible. I know we have our different people up here on the call that are attempting to fix the problem. Lynn, are you there now?
Here.
Okay. All right. I don't know. We lost the connection there for a moment. Okay. So I don't know. Did you hear that last question, Lynn?
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right. What the question was the following. She was asking, does the oligarchy specifically target countries which have a legacy of creativity? She was citing the role of Greece and Italy, for example, and I think she was asking, might there not be some specific reason why the oligarchy tries to destroy countries that have this kind of legacy of great contributions to human culture, I think is what the question was. And I think we're still having some problems with our technical connection here. Lynn, are you there? Well, I can tell that I'm connected, but I think that there is, at this point, we have had our second technical snafu here this evening. And we're going to try once again to see if we can get connected, but we are really kind of at the end of our discussion this evening. We're going to try to get Lynn on, and we'll forget the last question and see if we can get Lynn on and give us some final remarks here for our 10th call this evening. So I know my technical man is doing that. While we're doing that, I'll just reference to people, as I told them at the beginning, we should be pressing like crazy for the Congresses up still. They have one more week to be in around Glass-Steagall. As Mr. LaRouche indicated, these 4 senators have taken the high ground in terms of the Glass-Steagall question. And we'll see if we can get Mr. LaRouche in here for one more attempt to have some concluding remarks here this evening, because we've just kind of lost the connection for our second time this evening. So I apologize to everybody on the call, and I know that there's an effort right now to see if we can get him back on, to see if we can make some concluding remarks. And I'm going to sit here for another minute or so and see if we can get Mr. LaRouche back on before we are going to call it an evening this evening. I think Lynn's last remarks here were very much to the point in terms of the challenge before us. And I think the statement from Tony Pappert is already up on the website. So, okay, I think that, all right, Lynn, you're back on now?
Yeah, sure, I'm on. Just
okay. Now. Okay, I realize that. All right, Lynn, we seem to be having a technical problem here. So why don't you, if you could give us some summary remarks. I know we've had a lot of discussion here this evening, going through a wide range. Perhaps you could just summarize for us, for those who are still on the phone, Lynn, what you think should be the focus coming from off the call here this evening.
Yeah, well, the point is we have to realize that we have to, as what started from Tony Pappert and his remarks, which were done on the basis of my conception, that's the way that we have to go. We have to get rid of all this kind of practical schmackle kind of stuff, and realize that there are certain universal physical principles, efficient principles, which can be traced through the ups and downs of the development of progress in terms of human development. We're now in a point where we have access to opportunities to discover things we have never discovered before. like what the galactic issue is. That's a new phase for scientists in terms of practice today. And these are the kinds of things we must rely upon. Mankind must go forward. Mankind must reach levels of understanding of the solar system and beyond anything they've known before. In great periods of history, mankind has always made, by some people at least, has made great contributions to mankind's knowledge of things that mankind had never known before. And that's the idea, to go where mankind has never gone before and do it successfully. And that is the division. I mean, what does it mean? If you've got children, what do you want to give them? A sense of a future. What's a future? It's mean participating in where man is able to go where mankind had never gone before. And that's the whole name of the game. If you're trying to be practical, you ain't human.
Okay. All right. Well, Lynn, thank you so much. This was a tremendous discussion this evening. We'll be getting the recording out to everyone tomorrow. And that concludes our 10th Fireside Chat with Lyndon LaRouche. And so, good night, Lynn, and good night to everybody on the call.
Good. Thank you.